God's chosen ones, why you're aging backwards, and it's not genetics. You thought the wrinkles came from time, but heaven saw they came from warfare. You looked in the mirror and whispered, "I look tired," but God replied, "No, you're just heavy from what I never meant you to carry." And now people are starting to say it. You look lighter, younger, brighter. But it's not the skincare, is it? It's the surrender. _ This is not beauty, it's breakthrough. This is not vanity, it's vibrational purity. _ If your body's been changing in ways you can't explain, if strangers say you're glowing but don't know your story, then this message was written in heaven with your name on it. Because you're not just getting younger, you're coming home to who you've always been. Early morning, Atlanta suburb. Mist clings to the sidewalk. Elena walks alone, hoodie pulled over her head. The world is still asleep. She wasn't trying to look younger, that was never the goal. She just wanted to breathe again. Elena had survived the kind of heartbreak you don't post about. Not the loud kind, but the quiet decay that shows up in the mirror before it shows up in your prayers. The kind that makes your skin dull, your jaw clench, your shoulders fold inward like you're trying to disappear inside your own life. She was 42, but grief made her feel 70. Her smile hadn't reached her eyes in months. And yet, something had shifted. It started small. A neighbor said she looked rested. But Elena hadn't slept in days. Then a cashier commented, "You have such soft eyes." Soft? No one had said that in years. Not since before the divorce. Not since her mother's funeral. Then, the strangest moment of all, she passed a homeless man outside the gas station. He looked up, squinting, and murmured with a grin, "Glow, that ain't skincare, that's spiritual obedience." She stopped cold. "Excuse me?" But he was already humming a hymn, rocking back and forth like nothing had happened. Elena didn't know it yet, but something sacred had begun to unfold. Her face was changing, her posture, even her eyes, not because of a new serum or green smoothie, but because the weight was finally lifting. Her soul was waking up and her body was following. She didn't know the words for it, but heaven did. What she was experiencing wasn't rejuvenation, it was remembrance. Because when God starts restoring what you thought was lost, even your cells start rejoicing. Part 1. The weight that aged her. Elena used to smile without thinking. Now it felt like her face had forgotten how. Her reflection no longer startled her, it exhausted her. She'd grown used to the dullness in her eyes, the tightness in her jaw, the slump in her shoulders that hadn't always been there. People thought she was just tired, but what they didn't know was that she wasn't aging from time. She was aging from weight. Not the kind measured in pounds, but in expectations, betrayals, invisible battles fought behind a nurse's smile. There were years of picking up pieces that weren't hers. Years of being the strong one, the dependable one, the one who never got to fall apart. And slowly the light faded. Her husband had left 2 winters ago. No scandal, just silence, just a voicemail at 2 a.m. You always wanted too much. And maybe she did. She wanted to be chosen. Wanted to be heard. He wanted someone to stay. But what stayed instead were the responsibilities, the bills, the memories, and the echo of being too much for someone who never saw her depth as holy. One morning she stood alone in her kitchen, cradling a chipped mug of peppermint tea. The world was still dark, and for the first time she wasn't rushing. She wasn't pretending. In the glassy surface of the microwave, she caught something strange. A faint glimpse of herself. Not the tired woman with worry lines, but a younger version, the girl with hope in her face and fire in her chest. And something inside cracked. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply whispered, "Where did I go?" And deep in her spirit, a voice answered, "You didn't disappear. You just buried yourself under burdens I never asked you to carry." That's when she sank to the floor. Not in defeat, but in surrender. The weight began to slip. Not all at once, but enough to feel her spine lengthen and her lungs expand. And in that moment, something sacred stirred. The years that had collapsed her began to reverse. Not because time turned back, but because the truth broke through. She wasn't aging. She was over-functioning. She was surviving without support. And now she was letting God hold what she could no longer carry. It was never her age. It was the false strength that made her older than she was. And as she knelt there in the hush of her kitchen, she heard it again. "I will renew your youth like the eagle." Psalm 103:5. Not in creams or compliments, but in surrender. Part 2, the silent hurt. She had perfected the art of smiling without meaning it. Elena's face had become a mask, polite, practiced, polished. At work, she was the calming nurse, the one families requested. At home, she was the strong mother, the provider, the planner. But no one saw her in the mirror at midnight. That was when the silence screamed the loudest. Most nights, she stood at the bathroom sink long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring into her own eyes, and still, she couldn't find herself. The eyeliner couldn't hide the dullness. The moisturizer couldn't reach the places hollowed out by years of shouldering pain that wasn't hers. Grief had settled beneath her skin like an unwelcome tenant. The muscles in her face ached from years of holding back tears. Her jaw never relaxed. Her mouth forgot how to smile without effort. Even her eyes had grown guarded, like they were bracing for the next disappointment. People said she looked tired, but the truth? She was wounded. There was no headline heartbreak, no sudden explosion, just years of quiet erasure, of being unseen in rooms she gave everything to, of choosing others, always others, until there was nothing left for herself. The shake me up. And it leaves a mark, not just in the soul, but in the body. She didn't know that the face can remember sorrow, that the nervous system can keep secrets long after the words are buried, that stress, heartbreak, and spiritual abandonment can reshape your very appearance. But heaven knew. One night, as she stood in the blue glow of the bathroom light, something shifted. No sound, no revelation, just an unraveling. Her shoulders dropped, her tongue softened from the roof of her mouth, and her body, her beautiful, aching, overworked body, finally exhaled. The tightness loosened, the storm stilled, and in the stillness she felt it. Not shame, not regret, by the presence of peace. God was not scolding her for her exhaustion. He was tending to it. He wasn't telling her to try harder. He was inviting her to heal slower. Because when God begins to restore you, he starts with your silence. He sees where the pain hardened your features. He notices what sorrow etched into your face. And gently, without judgment, he begins softening what life tried to harden. And this was her beginning. Not with fanfare, not with answers, but with quiet. And for the first time in years, Elena felt beautiful again. Not because her face had changed, but because her soul had finally unclenched. Part 3. The Hidden Sign. It started with small things. A woman at the grocery store paused in the produce aisle, tilted her head and said, "You have the kind of eyes people trust." Elena blinked, startled. She hadn't been wearing makeup, hadn't even brushed her hair that well. picking up oranges and almond milk after her shift. Another time, a little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve at the park and whispered, "She looks like an angel." The mother smiled apologetically, but the boy's eyes stayed locked on Elena, not with fear, but with knowing. Even strangers on the sidewalk began offering nods, smiles, random kindness. It was strange, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar, like heaven was leaving breadcrumbs through people's mouths. At first, Elena chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe people were just being nice. Maybe she looked less tired. Maybe she had finally started sleeping better. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about her sleep schedule. It was something else, something sacred. She had stopped carrying what wasn't hers, and heaven was starting to show on her skin. Her hair, without warning, had more bounce, not from a salon, just alive. Her eyes, once dim, now seemed to hold light, like something had been switched on behind them. She laughed without guilt. She walked without apologizing for taking up space. The mirror didn't just reflect beauty. It reflected clarity. She didn't need validation anymore, but she was receiving it, not as flattery, but as prophetic confirmation. Methought, the power that held her, her glow wasn't cosmetic, it was coded, an outward reflection of an inward restoration, an invisible shift that heaven had already seen, now becoming visible to the world. Because when God begins to heal the inside, your outside stops hiding, and people feel it before you do. They don't have the words for it, so they say things like, "You look different. You seem lighter. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But what you're doing is less important than what God is undoing. He's peeling off the shame, softening the places sorrow had made sharp, pulling the light back through your skin, your voice, your presence. You're not glowing because life is easy. You're glowing because you finally stopped dimming your light to make others comfortable. You've been with God, and it shows." Part 4. The Soul Hook. When joy comes back, so does the light. She hadn't danced in years. Not since her wedding, not since her mother's voice went silent in the hospital, not since joy felt like a language she forgot how to speak. But that afternoon, something strange happened. It was raining, not heavy, just soft summer rain, and Elena was walking through the park with her daughter Ava, now 16, earbuds in and hoodie up. And then a song played on a nearby speaker. Something old, something from childhood. Something that reached past her thoughts and tapped her spirit. She stopped, right there, in the middle of the sidewalk. Soaked sneakers and all. Elena started to sway. Ava rolled her eyes, laughing. "Mum, seriously?" Elena smiled. A real one, the kind that rises up, not out. "Come on," she said, hand outstretched. "Just one spin." And to her own surprise, she spun. Not to impress, not to perform, but to feel. And for the first time in years, her body didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an instrument of joy. She laughed, not politely, not gently, but loud, uncontrolled. And Ava, once embarrassed, laughed too. Something broke open between them. Not apart, together. Rain soaked their clothes, grass clung to their shoes, but Elena didn't care. She felt free, she felt light, she felt young, not in age, in spirit. As joy is not a mood, it's a resurrection. And that day, under grey skies and God's laughter, joy didn't just return, it rewrote her face. Something in her cheeks lifted. Her voice carried further. Even strangers passed by and smiled, as if her moments of freedom gave them permission to feel again too. This was more than happiness. This was evidence. Proof that the war inside her had quieted. Proof that the soul once reopened has the power to rewind what sorrow tried to age. She didn't plan the dance. She didn't rehearse the glow. But the moment she gave joy permission to live again. Her body followed. Her face followed. Her frequency rose. And heaven whispered, "This is the real you. The one I created before heartbreak disguised her. Keep dancing. You're not losing years. You're losing what never belonged in you." Part 5. The Divine Redirect. The glow was never the goal, it was the signal. Elena never expected to be seen like that again, not for her beauty, not for her mind, not even for her story. But then the email came. It wasn't from a hospital, not another patient care position, it came from a wellness center. One of those places with sunlit rooms and essential oils and yoga mats stacked like sacred scrolls. The director had heard about her. Not from a resume. From someone who felt something after meeting her in the park. He said her presence had a calm that couldn't be taught. That they weren't looking for more staff, but they were praying for someone who carried light, someone who understood pain, someone who could speak healing without quoting scriptures, just by standing in a room. "I don't know how to explain it," the director had written. "But your name kept coming up when we talked about realignment, restoration, frequency medicine." Elena stared at the message, heart pounding. She hadn't applied. She hadn't even dreamed this far ahead. She closed her eyes and prayed, "God, what are you doing?" And deep within she felt it. Not a voice, but a pull. This wasn't about your healing, daughter. It was about your realignment. All those years of breaking, all those months of weeping in silence, all those nights where she questioned her worth, her beauty, her age. They were not detours, they were training. The glow people kept mentioning, it wasn't the result, it was the confirmation. She had passed through the fire, and now she was radiant. Not because she'd fought to be seen, but because she'd learned to walk in truth without apology. That afternoon, she walked into the center for a meeting, and as she passed through the glass doors, the receptionist looked up and whispered, "Oh wow, I thought you were one of the practitioners already. There's something about your face, it's like..." "Peaceful?" Elena smiled, not modestly, not awkwardly, but with authority. "That's what healing looks like," she said gently. And in that moment she realized this wasn't about looking younger. This was about returning to her calling, to her joy, to her glow, to herself. Heaven had been writing her a new assignment. And the beauty the world kept noticing? It wasn't a reward. It was a signal that she was ready. Maybe they'll keep asking, "Your secret?" Maybe they'll think it's your skincare, your diet, your new morning routine. Let them wonder. Because the truth is sacred. You didn't reverse time through effort. You didn't chase beauty through desperation. You came home. You came home to your soul. And your body followed. You stopped fighting. You started surrendering. And heaven responded. The glow on your face? That's what happens when shame falls off. When sorrow releases. When God removes the layers you were never meant to carry. You're not crazy for noticing the changes. You're not imagining the likeness. You're not foolish for believing that this is spiritual. Because it is. Your hair, your skin, your voice, your eyes. They are responding to the resurrection happening inside of you. And no, it's not vanity. It's vibrational purity. It's the reward of obedience. And the world sees a woman who looks younger. But heaven sees a warrior who has finally stopped hiding. And I need to ask you this. Are you sure you're not one of the chosen just because you haven't seen a miracle yet? Because maybe the miracle is you, still standing, still shining, still soft, even after what life tried to harden. This isn't about reversing time. This is about returning to design. I will restore to you the years the locusts have eaten. Joel 2:25. If this story stirred something in you, if your reflection has been changing in ways you can't explain, you're not alone. You're not just healing, you're awakening. If this story touched you, the next one goes even deeper. Subscribe so you don't miss what heaven is unfolding next. Comment, I'm not aging, I'm awakening. Share this with someone who's glowing, but doesn't yet know why. Support this mission, not with donations, but with faith, presence, and love. Because this is sacred ground we're walking on together.